QED 2017 is fast approaching, and you don't want to miss it. In the past, QED has brought you the Arrows of Time, the origin of recording, an escape from the Westboro Baptists, the sex bias of sex science, and all manner of other science, pseudoscience, activism, slacktivism, and more. Plus, insects for breakfast. Yum. QED 2017 takes place on the 14th and 15th of October in Manchester, England. We've already announced speakers like Sophie Wilson, co-inventor of the ARM computer chip, Simon Singh, who will be showing how to crack a genuine Enigma machine, Phil Scraton talking through the real-life cover-up of the Hillsborough tragedy, and physicists Helen Chersky and Tim O'Brien. We'll have a live show from the Parapod Boys, and the whole event will be emceed by ace magician Dave Annick. Have some laughs, meet some new friends, make new connections, all for only £109, including all the main stage talks, panels, podcasts, workshops, our Saturday night entertainment, and lots more. Check out qedcom.org for details. We'll see you in October.
It is Thursday, the 7th of September 2017, and you're listening to Skeptics with a K, the podcast for science, reason and critical thinking. Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptic Society, a non-profit organisation for the promotion of scientific skepticism on Merseyside, around the UK and internationally. I am your host, Mike Hall. With me today is Marsh.
Hello.
And Alice.
Hello.
So I went to the zoo.
You went to the zoo?
Yeah,
I went to the zoo.
You told me that you went to the zoo.
Chester Zoo?
Nice. I did go to Chester Zoo. It was good.
They've got baby elephants at Chester Zoo.
The baby elephants, every time we're sitting there, I'd spot the baby elephant and go, oh, there's baby elephant walking. Straight away in my head. Straight away in my head, baby elephant walk. Every time. So I had baby elephant walk in my head for the entire time I was in Chester Zoo, because every time I kind of forgot about it, glanced at an elephant and went, oh yeah, baby elephant
Could
walk.
you not have undone it by looking at one of the other animals and thinking of songs to do with those animals? An orangutan, maybe King of the Swingers from Jungle Book.
I didn't see any of the orangutans there, actually.
Oh,
when I was,
they're amazing.
I didn't see an orangutan.
I think last time I went I don't know if this is Chester Zoo or Twycross Zoo. Twycross Zoo is like near my parents' house and is like famous for having lots and lots and lots of primates. And they've got the orangutans. And I can't remember which one it was, but I went once and there was like a baby orangutan sleeping inside a big Hessian sack thing, and then waking up and kind of trying to figure its way out of the big Hessian sack thing. It's the cutest thing in the world.
But I saw the capybaras, which are the big rodent.
Big hamsters.
They're
big,
weird, them,
big,
aren't
massive
they?
rodent things, yeah. So I saw those. I like those. I saw a monkey. I think it was a mandrill. They're covering both of its eyes, like the See No Evil monkey.
Was there only one of them?
Yes.
Where's the two mates gone?
I don't know.
They killed the deaf ones and the mute ones.
He'd shouted for them, but one of them didn't hear, and the other one
didn't answer.
Just didn't answer.
Yeah.
So I took a photo of that. I thought I'm having a photo of a accidental See No Evil monkey. I went in the bat thing. They have a bat thing.
Yeah, the bat thing's good.
Go flying around, and similar but less dark, the butterfly thing.
Yeah.
Same situation, but different flappy little bastard.
Butterfly houses are amazing. I like butterfly houses.
That was
They're
quite
really
good.
warm. They always have to be really hot.
Yes.
Yeah, so you get sort of sleepy in there.
So I enjoyed that a lot. But when we were down there, Lana went to feed the giraffes.
Oh, the Jaffs.
So she went to feed the giraffes. So they took her up on the thing, and she had to put wellies on and big overalls. And the giraffes came over, and they had to feed the giraffes. And obviously, Chester, quite famously, recently had two baby giraffes, one on Boxing Day and one in kind of April.
I did not know
baby
that.
Giraffes. Famously, they had baby giraffes.
I was completely unaware.
They had live webcams on the giraffe enclosure
and I watched
for like the last couple of months of the pregnancy, saying any day now the giraffe is going to drop.
I wasn't watching it.
And, of course, the giraffe dropped and was up and about and walking within,
as they do,
within 10
yeah.
minutes. Turns out that we give birth to babies far too young.
Yeah, they're barely formed.
They're basically still a fetus when they
are
pop
still
out.
fetuses. But, I mean, aren't they a fetus until the moment they pop out, they stop being a fetus? But that's true anyway. No matter how long it was gestating.
But we, so the baby giraffe couldn't reach up to get onto the platform where they were feeding. So the baby giraffe was just poking his nose under the fence, licking up the leaves that the other giraffes had dropped.
Right.
Which was quite adorable and a little bit pathetic. But we were told a story about a giraffe that used to be in Chester Zoo called George.
George Giraffe,
who was no longer there. But George was 6 meters tall.
He's no longer there in the sense of He's now 12
Yes,
metres underground. Do you have to bury giraffes further underground? No, because you bury them flat.
No,
You don't bury them stood up.
You can only bury giraffes upright. It's part of the ethical laws. So the giraffe house at Chester Zoo is 5 metres tall. The doors are 5 metres tall. George was 6 metres. He had to stoop to get into the giraffe house. And all the way around the giraffe house at Chester Zoo is a moat, a big moat, which at the time was full of ducks. And I'm sitting there...
And not water. It was full of water with some ducks.
And ducks
I think statistically.
So I'm sitting there watching the giraffes while the other people are going, look at the ducks. And I'm going, there's a giraffe there.
Yeah.
And you're looking at a duck, which you can see any day of the week at the park.
I do like a good duck, but I also quite like a giraffe.
I mean, they're good giraffes. Their horns are pathetic and useless.
Yeah.
Oh, they're cute.
Ridiculous.
They've never used those horns for anything.
Pathetic. And when they fight, because normally you see animals with horns.
I don't like giraffe fighting.
When they fight,
because
they
the
kind of
necks
lock
they're
horns
gonna
and things.
Well, they attack each other with their necks.
But they do. They attack with their necks.
It's mental. Stop doing that.
Neck on neck action.
That's horrible. And their heads get all like wobbly. Oh, it's weird.
But George the giraffe is the reason the moat was there, because he was so tall that he could stoop over the fence and nick shit off people who were just standing there holding an ice cream, and George would come in and go, hum. So they had to put the moat around the thing so George couldn't reach the punters standing there with their ice creams or whatever. So I did Chester Zoo. That was lots of fun. I enjoyed that.
Nice.
I saw a tiger.
Tiger.
And it was rubbish. Because part of the problem with zoos, and this is the case in Chester Zoo, as in many zoos, is how many zoos do you go to where you go up and it's got a big sign saying, "Oh, this is where the buffalo live," and what you look at is an empty field.
Yeah, because the buffalo are all fucked up.
And it's like, I mean, there's a buffalo here somewhere, but it could well just be an empty field, and they're playing some buffalo sound effects.
It's like when someone walks up to your house and says, "This is where Mike Hall lives," and you look through the window and you're not there.
I'm not there.
Not even there. Can't even see you there.
But I did briefly glimpse a tiger in the tiger bit at the animal thing.
Are you sure it was definitely a tiger? You weren't just like spotting patterns?
Or I could have been just really close to a domestic cat.
You could have been very close to a domestic cat.
Indeed, that I assume that was a capybara, not a nearby guinea pig.
I don't think you saw a tiger. I think it was just pareidolia. Because the thing is, the number of times you go to a zoo and you don't see the tiger, you go and get your money's worth. So that's evolution. That's evolutionary psychology right there. You've evolved to see tigers where they aren't, just so you don't feel ripped off when you go to the zoo.
But Chester Zoo is a very good zoo.
It is a good zoo.
It is a good zoo.
Which I gather is a problem for them, because I think there's legally you're not allowed.
They're too good a zoo.
Yeah, because legally you're not allowed to send an animal from a good zoo to a shit zoo. Which means when they need to...
Because a Shih Tzu is a small dog, it can't take care of animals.
It can't take care of animals. So when Chester needs to get a shot of animals, they can't, because they can only send them to a zoo that is as good as or better than them.
Is it like Knowsley Safari Park, when they need to get shot of animals?
They do a whole different thing.
They got shot of animals. They were getting shot of animals.
So I went to the zoo. That was fun.
Blimey.
Alice, you've been up to York.
I've been to York. I've been to fucking everywhere at the minute.
You have?
Yeah, I've been to York I went and gave a talk at York Skeptics, which was fun, whilst I had this voice.
We should probably mention you're not very well.
I'm incredibly sick right now, so I'm trying desperately not to pass it on to anybody. Although Marsh has already had it. Marsh passed it on to me.
It's an illness I gave to you and to Nicola and to probably other people who were with me in Edinburgh, so there's a good chance that other people will start
I
coming
will not be well pleased if I come down sick after this.
I've got hand sanitizer right here, so that anytime I cough, I can clean my hands.
Well, I like that you're triple teaming: hand sanitizer, a hot drink, and a Lemsip.
It's not a Lemsip. It's just hot. It's hot squash.
It's hot blackcurrant.
It's just hot juice. It's just hot Ribena. I mean, I do love a hot Ribena.
Well, because it does the same thing as Lemsip. It's just soothing on your throat.
Paracetamol.
I was a hot Ribena and a paracetamol.
I've taken some paracetamol.
So paracetamol and a hot Ribena, and it's
DIY Lemsip.
DIY Lemsip.
The paracetamol is actually from the Lemsip flu tablets, which
ridiculous.
Which I didn't buy. They were bought for me. Normally, I would buy like the cheap own brand ones because it's the same stuff. So yeah,
I mean, don't tell that to Ben Goldacre. He says
the packaging matters. Is that even proper Ribena, or is it own brand blackcurrant squash?
It's Tesco blackcurrant squash.
Statistically, studies have shown that Ribena actually tastes better than own brand squash.
I don't like Ribena. It's too there's too much sugar. It's like syrupy. It's really thick and syrupy.
I know. I love Ribena. It's really thick and syrupy. It's exactly what I like about Ribena.
So, I don't mind Ribena. Nicola drinks Vimto.
Oh, I
Fucking hate Vimto.
I love Vimto, and I love that.
We've descended into like British product chat again.
The thing about Vimto is the first QED we did Vimto cheesecake for the dessert at the dinner because we wanted something Manchestery.
Yeah.
So we did Vimto from Manchester.
Vimto was invented in Manchester. Yeah. So we wanted something Manchestery, and they talked about could we do a Manchester tart, and we decided on the Vimto cheesecake instead. Until Tom Williamson texted. No, I think he tweeted saying, "I'm not having this dessert because I refuse to eat any food that is an anagram of vomit."
Yeah.
So, thanks, Tom.
I mean, because we wanted to give them something from Manchester, so it was a toss-up between a Vimto cheesecake or a copy of The Guardian, and we thought most of our attendees have probably already got a copy of The Guardian, so it's fine.
So you've been off touring.
I've been to York whilst very sick and given a talk at York Skeptics in the pub, which was really cool. Mm-hmm. And then Rob McDermott from York Skeptics showed me around York the next day, so I had a nice little wander around at the same time as I have had a dislocated foot. I've been like basically in the wars lately. I've had a dislocated foot from Edinburgh and a cold from Edinburgh, and decided to go and stand in a pub and give a talk and then walk around the cobbled streets of York.
That sounds sensible. I did text you to suggest roller skates
that
instead, but
probably wouldn't work with the cobbles.
Cobbles are a confounding factor.
Well, when we were in Edinburgh, what I suggested, because you were looking for like a walking stick to help you around, I said if we can't find a walking stick, we can probably go into a tourist shop and buy a load of balloons and fill them with helium, just enough to take the weight off your foot, so you can sort of just slowly bouncing down the street. Yeah.
I see.
It seems to be relocated today, so it's not too painful today. So this is good. I've had like nearly 2 weeks of not being able to walk at all on one foot, but we walked around Edinburgh for several days, which is all hills and all stairs.
It is all hills.
Which wasn't so great.
So this is like the third Skeptics in the Pub talk you've given now, isn't it?
Yeah, I did Birmingham before the last recording, and then Edinburgh and York since. And then I have got Sheffield next month.
You do have Sheffield, that's right, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you're basically a veteran of the Skeptics in the Pub circuit now. They were already calling you the new Chris French. And so, Marsh, you went up to Edinburgh as well?
Yeah, I did. I did my bad PR talk in Edinburgh, although it was a new bit of bad PR talk, which was a bit different, because I've been given the same bad PR, or variants of the same bad PR talk for about 6 years, something like that. Meanwhile, all the stuff that I was saying, hey, here are some light-hearted and inconsequential examples of how the news media is fucked and the system is broken, and that could be easily exploited by something with a more malevolent intent. Whoops. Turns out that's basically what's happened over the last couple of years, is that malevolent intent has very, very firmly taken hold. So I did a talk, which I think I'd called something around the area from PR to fake news, or something in that kind of area. So I had a whole new bit in there about fake news that I'd never really given before. I'd given a 5-minute Ignite version of it before, but I hadn't actually given a full version of it. So it was quite disorienting because I had an audience there, and normally when I give my bad PR talk, there's reliably, right, there's a couple of gags here, there's a light-hearted story here that gets a laugh, whereas I'd kind of, to fit the new material in, had taken out a lot of the light-weighted stuff, and then thought, while I was on stage, a lot of people aren't really laughing at this. Normally there's a lot more laughs in it. Is this going really badly? And then I realised after, no, it's because you just put horrifyingly grim material in there. But it seemed to go really well. I enjoyed it. I did have one problem, which was that I got to Edinburgh like in the afternoon, and then Alice and I, you were already up from the day before from your talk. We went to catch up with Richard Wiseman, had a cup of tea with Richard Wiseman, a bit of a chat. And by the time we were done there, I had to go back and do my talk. And by the time we were finished the talk, it was about 11 o'clock. And I hadn't eaten at all, so I had to go and get food at 11 o'clock at night. And we wandered a little bit around Edinburgh. And the only place I could find, I thought, go to a chippy. Bog standard fish and chip type shop. I had a look on the menu. Didn't really like the look of the fish cake stuff that they had. So I thought cheeseburger and chips. You can't go wrong with cheeseburger and chips. That's going to be reliable in most places. As a takeaway, it's not going to be amazing. It's going to be reliable.
But you know what you're getting.
You know what you're getting. Describe to me what you'd imagine I'd get with cheeseburger and chips.
Cheeseburger and chips.
Yeah.
You'd get chips.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
You'd get bread.
Yeah.
Burger.
Yeah.
Cheese.
Yeah.
Bread.
Yeah.
Maybe sesame seeds.
None of those things.
No?
So what I got the chips.
Okay.
I got a burger.
1 for 1 so far. Okay.
Yeah. So there was a burger.
Right.
I got cheese.
Okay.
Inside the burger.
Within the burger.
Melted. And then it was deep fried in batter.
No bread?
No bread. No bread. It was cheese within a burger, dipped in batter and fried. I was like, what the fuck is this thing?
I can see how you would describe that as a cheeseburger.
in the sense that you're listing the ingredients. You're listing some of the ingredients. It's the most revolting thing I've ever tasted in my entire experience.
So batter in lieu of bread?
Batter in lieu of bread. And also, it was like a sort of a hammy type. You get those sort of cheap hammy type burgers, not like a burger, but like a more of a hammy type thing.
No.
Yeah, it wasn't. And the cheese is the kind of cheese that you could presumably inject into the middle of a burger. Or maybe it might even have been two thin burgers, either side of some cheese that have been coagulated by, first of all, the melting of the cheese, and second of all, the battering that it had taken in a literal and metaphorical sense.
Good Lord.
So that wasn't very nice. That was not nice at all. It was pretty grim. The rest of Edinburgh was fine. We saw some very good stuff, fun stuff, but that was not good.
Let's start with an email from a listener. Peter wrote, IBSstudy.org is a study by Beth Israel Deaconess and Harvard Medical School. These are some of the big hospitals in Boston, Massachusetts. I don't know the full details, but the video link may send Mike running, screaming into the night.
Blimey, okay.
This is what Peter said. So, IBSstudy.org. What is IBSstudy.org? Well, first off, it's a terrible website. Aside from being very ugly to look at, the source code contains meta keywords, just in case you're a search spider from 1998. And it is written in HTML5, which was first published in 2008. So there is no real reason why you should see these technologies together in the wild. There's like a decade between meta keywords and HTML5.
Maybe they're worried that maybe they're just thinking that meta keywords are going to have a massive comeback. It's going to go all retro.
Yeah. I mean, everything comes around, isn't it? It's like fashion.
But if they thought that, they wouldn't be writing in HTML5. They'd be thinking, no, you should go back to HTML first version, retro.
Yeah. Colin Wright's website, Colin Wright the juggler, his website is like in HTML3 or HTML2 or something like that. He's gone really retro on it.
Does it work on anything?
Yeah, because the browser's all backward compatible.
Okay, good.
So it all works.
There you go, Alice. You can allay your fears.
So that's IBSstudy.org. A terrific amount of the style sheet is unused, about 95%, so that's just wasted bytes. Time to first byte is under a second, which is okay, but could be improved further if they were to use a streaming templating engine like Dust.js or Talisman. Talisman's a templating engine that I wrote, incidentally.
Right, I see. Is that popularly used?
No,
just you.
No fucker used it. I wrote it. I was excited about it. I put a blog post out and went, hey, this is a thing. People, cool. Nobody used it.
Do you use it?
No. I haven't even got round to writing a project in it myself yet, never mind any other fucker. So their time to first byte is okay, but could be better. But the time to first meaningful paint is really bad because of the render blocking CSS and JavaScript they've got in there. I don't know if there is a good excuse for over 2 seconds to first meaningful paint on a 3G connection when your total page weight is only 600k and 400k of that is one image, which is loaded afterwards anyway. But maybe that's just me. The content, however, when it eventually renders,
is an advert, probably. I hate it when you load, if you scroll on your phone, you're looking random websites, the adverts load way quicker than the rest of the page. Fuck off every time. Just close that. No, if you prioritise your advertising, I just don't care. I don't care. That happens a lot with football news.
I would imagine that is probably the case where they've got render blocking JavaScript or CSS in the main page, but their ads are iframes and so are being served independently and painted independently. That would be my guess. It's
annoying. Just like if you're on your phone and any page you visit where the ad suddenly takes over the entire screen and starts playing a video, it's like, and delete that and put that on my block list of websites that never to come back again.
They can fuck the fuck off. But the content, when it eventually comes in, describes a mind-body study for IBS, being irritable bowel syndrome. If you have irritable bowel syndrome, it says, you may be eligible to participate in a novel mind-body research study. The study is being run by Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and Harvard Medical School, both of whom have their logos up on the site. Mm-hmm. And it gives an email address and a telephone number to contact and a link. There is also a graphic, which looks like it's straight out of a 1960s Soviet propaganda cartoon, showing somebody sitting down with their brain and stomach visible and signals passing from their brain to their stomach, which is full of question marks.
Oh, blimey, look at that.
That's awful.
That's really weird, because his head is the same size, or their head is the same size of their body, Their brain is tiny.
It's way too small, and their stomach is 3 times the size of the brain.
And their stomach also doesn't go anywhere. So your brain can push questions into your stomach, but they just stay there. No wonder you have an upset stomach. You have no...
The stomach's full of question marks.
It's full of question marks, for one thing. There's no outlet, so there's no intestines, for example. It's not connected to your mouth at all.
Straight brain to stomach.
Brain to stomach, yeah.
This person has got some severe...
Well, that's their legs there.
Anatomical normality.
That's their legs coming out of the front of their stomach.
That is legs coming out of the front of their stomach. That's true.
This is awful.
The link goes to a piece on the website cbslocal.com, which looks to be an overarching website for local CBS affiliate stations.
Yes,
Specifically, it goes to boston.cbslocal.com. cbslocal.com is even more terrible than the last site. I stopped the site loading after it downloaded 50 megabytes of data.
What?
Only 35 of which appear to be related to the auto-playing video.
Oh, for fuck's sake. I hate that as well. An autoplay. There is never a time when I want to go to a site and I want to see an auto-playing video. Except YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube is literally the only case I can think of where I want to play a video automatically.
I think there should be a rule, certainly, because it's worse when the auto-playing video is a fucking advert. I think there should be a rule around advertising that you can only serve an ad in the same format as the content that the person is visiting there for. So if you're visiting a web page, you can only serve like an image ad. You can't serve a video, whereas you can serve an ad video on a video.
On a video, yeah. I could see what you mean. Yeah. So CBS
it's the equivalent of like listening to a podcast and there's an ad on there, and so someone comes up and sticks pictures in front of your face as you listen to the podcast. No, this was an audio-only medium. I only want audio, thank you.
So on CBS Local, time to first meaningful paint is over 12 seconds on a 3G connection, which is truly awful. And that's before we talk about the user agent sniffing the 4.5 megabytes of JavaScript and the Taboola links loaded in at the bottom.
Fucking Taboola.
But listeners are probably more interested in the content. I've got a feeling it's just me who's interested in this faffy shit.
Well, I mean, Taboola aren't interested in the content. They don't care what they put in those spaces as long as they get paid for it.
The article describes the experience of a woman called Linda, who, desperate for relief from her IBS, enrolls in a medical study, only to discover that the pill they are planning to give her was a placebo. He told me it would be a placebo, and I was so disappointed, she is quoted as saying. And to be fair to her, I would be disappointed too. I mean, that researcher has just completely fucked the blinding.
Unless that was part of it. Unless there was a crossover study where you tell people it's placebo and they may or may not be getting the placebo.
Leave it with me.
Hello.
Leave it with me.
Hello.
So, yeah, this researcher has just shot the blinding. These data are now useless and everyone is wasting their time. But the article continues. She knew it was a placebo through the entire study, and still it worked. So, setting aside my general skepticism of the amazing power of the placebo effect, there is a resistance within the medical community to the use of placebos because they necessitate lying to your patients. It requires you to give them a dummy pill and tell them it is medicine. And this is something that many doctors are not prepared to do. This has led to a program of research on open-label placebos, that being placebos where the participants know they are only getting a placebo, and therefore there is no deception involved, therefore the ethical problems vanish, but does the placebo effect vanish alongside them? The lead author on this research is Ted Kapchuk, who we talked about on the show a few weeks ago.
I thought I remembered his name. Yeah, I thought I recognised it.
That's what you said a few weeks ago when I mentioned Ted Kapchuk.
Did I really?
As well.
He's got a very familiar-sounding name.
Kapchuk is the director of the program in placebo studies at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and is also professor of social medicine at Harvard. Writing in 2014, David Gorski said of Ted Kapchuk, his work on placebo effects has been a frequent topic here on Science-Based Medicine and has been a mixed bag. On the one hand, Kapchuk does sometimes do interesting work, but on the other hand, he can't seem to help himself when it comes to overselling it. Mm-hmm. With that in mind, Ted Kapchuk told CBS Local, the placebo effect is as real as hope is. You do not need deception or concealment for many conditions to get a significant and meaningful placebo response.
The placebo effect is as real as hope is.
It's as real as hope.
I mean, I'd probably agree. They're abstract concepts with no relation to anything real and physical.
So is Kapchuk overselling it here, as David Gorski claims he is prone to do? This particular study, which may be a study we've actually talked about on the show before, was titled Placebos Without Deception, a Randomized Control Trial in Irritable Bowel Syndrome. It was published in PLOS ONE in 2010. 80 patients diagnosed with IBS were randomized into two groups. The first group were given placebos and told they were placebos. The second group was given no treatment. After 21 days, the patients used a self-reported questionnaire to record their condition using a standard IBS GIS score. And a few other outcome measures as well. Patients in the no treatment arm reported a small improvement, and patients in the open-label placebo arm reported a larger improvement. The difference between the groups was significant, p-value of 0.002. The conclusion says, placebos administered without deception may be an effective treatment for IBS. Further research is warranted in IBS and perhaps for other conditions to elucidate whether patients can benefit patients using placebos consistent with informed consent. And presumably, IBSstudy.org is recruiting people to be part of this further research program that was called for in this trial.
Okay.
But there are a few problems with this paper. First, as I intimated earlier as part of a daft gag, the blinding is shot. Telling patients which group they are in is known to screw with your results. That's why we blind patients. In this study, the patients getting no treatment knew they were getting no treatment. Patients on placebo knew they were getting placebo. This can fool with your data, especially when you are dealing with patient-reported outcomes. Patients in the no treatment arm, for example, might underplay an improvement in their condition because they know they're getting no treatment. I can't be any better.
Yeah.
So they might underplay a genuine improvement.
They might also do something else in their lives as well. They might, if you know you're getting no treatment, you might seek out other.
There might be unreported parallel interventions there as well. That's true. Patients in the placebo arm, on the other hand, might exaggerate any improvements that they get, depending on what they believe about the power of the placebo effect. These patients might actually be in an identical condition at the end of the study, but self-report differently because of their beliefs and expectations. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I'm not persuaded that this paper is without deception, despite the fact that it's like placebos without deception is the title of the paper. Although the patients were honestly told that the pills are inert or inactive when they're handed over, and I hope they were also told what is meant by inert.
Yeah.
Because if they weren't told what inert means, it doesn't do anything. I mean, you're not directly lying to your patients, but it's not exactly informed consent.
Yes, yeah. These are without therapeutic indication. Yeah.
So hopefully patients were also told what was meant by inert and inactive. But they were also told placebo pills have been shown in rigorous clinical testing to produce significant mind-body healing processes, which I would characterize as deceptive.
It's bullshit, yeah.
Because placebo pills have not been shown to produce such effects. We must not confuse the effects measured in the placebo arm of clinical trials with a real therapeutic placebo effect. Ed Ernst actually co-authored a paper on this in 1995. From that paper, he says, quote, "We often and wrongly equate the response seen in the placebo arm of a clinical trial with the placebo effect. A review of the literature shows that most authors confuse a perceived placebo effect with the true placebo effect." And he then goes to argue that we should be accounting for factors like regression to the mean and spontaneous improvement and unrecorded parallel interventions and other things that I've been talking about on the show for months.
Yeah, so what you're saying is Edzard was 20 years
ago was making these same points in the literature and no one seems to have paid any attention.
But did he say fuck a lot while he did it? Because that could be the thing that changes it all.
That could be the big swinging difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kapchuk's claim to his open-label placebo patients is that rigorous testing shows placebo pills produce significant mind-body healing processes. That directly claims, 1, there is such a thing as a mind-body healing process, whatever the fuck that means. 2, that placebo pills are able to provoke this process. And 3, that this process can change the condition of the patient, specifically in this case, a patient with IBS. None of that is actually being demonstrated. And in fact, the second point there, that placebo pills are able to provoke this process, is what this study is aiming to test.
That's true, yeah.
Is it the deception which provokes the effect, or is it the pills? Or is it something else altogether? He starts off by telling his patients that it's definitely not the deception, it's pills. Which is deceptive.
Which is deceptive, yeah, if you don't know.
It is as deceptive as handing them a pill and saying this is medicine.
Well, the thing is, it might not be as deceptive as that, but this study is basically then trying to establish what level of deception, like what the effects of different levels of deception are. Yeah. Is one type of deception just as efficacious as another type of deception?
Call me cynical, but unblinded patients given pill and told it will make them feel better, report feeling better, is not a finding that's worth getting excited about. David Gorski was similarly unimpressed when he talked about this paper for Science-Based Medicine. He wrote, even though they did tell their subjects that the sugar pills they were being given were inert, the investigators also used suggestion to convince their subjects that these pills could nonetheless induce powerful mind-body effects. In other words, the investigators did the very thing they claimed they weren't doing. They deceived their subjects to induce placebo effects by exaggerating the strength of the evidence for the placebo effect. Returning to the article from the really very bad CBS local website, it's really slow to load.
Yeah.
It's a very poor website.
That's the important thing.
They go on to briefly mention another study by Ted Kapchuk on open-label placebos for migraines. This appears to be a paper. I searched around for this study. This was the only study that I could identify that could be a candidate for the study that they're talking about. The study was called Altered Placebo and Drug Labeling Changes the Outcome of Episodic Migraine Attacks. Ted Kapchuk is a co-author on this paper, and it was published in Science Translational Medicine in 2014. 66 patients who suffer with migraines were asked to record 7 instances of a migraine attack. So each of the 66 patients had to record 7 instances of a migraine attack.
Okay, consecutive 7 or just any 7?
Consecutive 7.
Okay, that's
7
better.
attacks.
It's not just like pick 7 of your migraines.
For each attack, they would record a pain score on a standard 0 to 10 scale.
Yeah.
30 minutes after their headache starts. So I think I've got a headache coming on. Start a clock. 30 minutes afterwards. How much pain are you in 0 to 10? They would then do the same thing at 2.5 hours. Mm-hmm. So after 2.5 hours, record a second pain score. Now, for the first attack, that was all they would do. Is they would, I feel a headache coming on, half an hour, how much pain am I in? 2.5 hours,
yeah. How
much pain am I in now? That was a no treatment control. For subsequent attacks, they would take an intervention after recording that baseline score.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, which is the 30-minute mark. So, I feel a headache coming on,
better
30
take
minutes,
something.
Record your pain, take a pill, wait 2.5 hours, how much pain are you in now?
Yeah.
So that's what they would do. Over the 6 attacks that featured an intervention, the patients were told one of 3 things. They were either told that the pill they were taking was Maxalt, which is a genuine migraine drug, or they were told that the pill was a placebo, or they were told that the pill might be placebo and might be Maxalt, but not definitively which. The envelope literally had written on it, Maxalt or placebo.
Right, okay.
So 3 different conditions. You had active treatment, placebo treatment, and blind treatment.
Yes.
For each of those 3 labels, then, they would either be given Maxalt or placebo.
Oh, okay, right, gotcha.
So across the 6 different attacks, they had 6 different states.
Yeah, so you could have Maxalt, but it says Maxalt, but it's a placebo. It says placebo, but it's actually Maxalt.
Yeah. You could have placebo-labeled placebo, placebo-labeled Maxalt, a blind placebo, Maxalt-labeled Maxalt, Maxalt-labeled placebo, or blind Maxalt.
Okay.
So does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah?
But did every patient have each of the 6?
Every patient had each of the 6, but they didn't do every possible order of randomization. They did as many orders of randomization as they could in 66 patients. Uh-huh. So some patients got Maxalt in the first envelope, then blinded, then placebo, then Maxalt, then blinded, then placebo.
Yes, yeah.
And some got the reverse order, and some got blinded first.
Some got the right... Yeah, gotcha.
But they didn't do every possible random combination because they didn't have enough patients to carry it out.
But each individual didn't have the same thing multiple times ever.
I believe that's the case from reading the study, yes.
That seems odd.
So every patient only got placebo-labeled placebo once. Every patient only got blind placebo once, etc.
That seems a really odd way of doing that study.
They weren't aware of that, were they?
They were aware that the placebo-labeled placebo was placebo-labeled placebo. They were aware that when they were getting something blind, but they didn't know what the blind thing was.
Sorry, were they aware that
they would get one of the 6 combinations?
Yeah, were they aware
only one time?
that this was studying?
I don't know.
Yeah, okay, because you thought, well, that one felt like a placebo. You know, well, I'm not going to get a placebo called placebo next time. I'm going to get something else next time.
Possibly so. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So patients who got no treatment reported a 15% increase in pain over between half hour and 2.5 hours.
Which makes sense.
So patients who got no treatment, a 15% increase in pain. Patients who got placebo and were told it was a placebo reported a 15% decrease in pain.
That doesn't necessarily make sense, but okay.
Patients who got placebo and were told it was Maxalt reported a 25% decrease in pain.
Okay.
Patients who got blind placebo reported a 22% decrease in pain.
I'm not going to hold all these numbers in my head, so I'm going to stop saying okay.
It's okay. It's not a problem. Patients who got Maxalt and were told it was a placebo reported a 36% decrease in pain. Patients who got Maxalt and were told it was Maxalt reported a 52% decrease in pain. And patients who got blind Maxalt reported a 54% decrease in pain. So more than Maxalt labeled Maxalt, but not significantly.
Yeah, such variance there.
So in short, Maxalt works.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's good to know. Even when you don't know what it is, Maxalt works. And 2, some fraction of the reported effect in an intervention for a subjective outcome is driven by placebo effects.
Mm-hmm.
None of that is a shock.
No.
None of that is a shock at all. Writing about this paper for Science-Based Medicine, David Gorski also expresses some surprise at Ted Kapchuk's interpretation of these data. Quote, "In the end, this study doesn't tell us much that is new or that we didn't know already. For a subjective finding, a significant part of the drug effect appears to be placebo. We knew that, which is why I found it rather odd that Ted Kapchuk exulted over how half the effect of Maxalt is due to placebo." And I've got to say I agree with David Gorski on this. Not only that, but when Ted Kapchuk was talking to the radio show Science Friday about this study, he talks about how patients were given either low, medium or high expectancies based on what they were told about the pill. So he characterized giving them something you're telling them is placebo as low expectancy, giving them something telling them it's Maxalt is high expectancy, and giving them something blind is a medium expectancy. But the paper specifically says they did not record patients' expectancies. And so Kapchuk is just assuming that the labels produced the desired expectancy in the patient.
Yeah.
He's just saying, I told them it was placebo, that's probably going to mean they've got a low expectancy of something happening. Kapchuk also told Science Friday, with reference to this study, "I think that in the same way that a physician has to calculate what pharmaceutical to give, how many milligrams he has to take of that drug, he or she might also have to calculate the exact right words to accompany the pharmaceutical." So he is literally talking about doctors figuring out what the best magic words are
what's
to
the order
say
of words to use?
to give the pill a better effect, which is completely absurd. And again, as David Gorski has pointed out, this is a glimpse into Ted Kapchuk's mind and how he thinks the world works.
Yeah.
Of course, despite this allegedly being an open-label placebo where patients are honestly told they are getting a placebo, except in the blind condition, I suppose, nevertheless, the patients are still misled about the effect that an inert intervention will have on their condition. According to the supplementary materials, the patients were told, "You are invited to take place in a research study for the purpose of understanding the effects of repeated administration of Maxalt for the treatment of acute migraine attacks and why placebo rates are so high in migraine therapy. Our first goal is to understand why Maxalt makes you pain-free in one attack but not in another. Our second goal is to understand why placebo pills can make you pain-free." So the patients are explicitly told placebo pills can make you pain-free.
Yeah.
When again, we do not know that that is the case. We know that patients receiving placebo report less pain, but we don't know if that's a modification of the report, a modification of their experience, or an actual modification of physiological pain. It could be any of them. We don't know.
Also, the fact that in the setup to the test, they've said placebo pills can make you pain-free.
Yes.
Just does away with his suggestion that that's low expectation. Because you've just given high expectation.
You
said
high expectation
placebo pills can make you go without pain.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to expect
and
that to be right.
most people who experience migraine and take migraine medication would know that even good migraine medication wouldn't make you pain-free.
Yeah.
Not only that, but there is a second outcome measure on this paper where patients are asked to record if they were pain-free after 2.5 hours. Kapchuk told them their placebos can make them pain-free, and they asked in the questionnaire, are you pain-free after 2.5 hours? And it turns out that the difference between open-label placebo and no treatment on the pain-free outcome measure is not statistically significant. So Kapchuk's own data on this study undermines his hypothesis that open-label placebos without deception elicit strong placebo effects, because there was no difference in the number of patients who were pain-free between no treatment and open-label placebo.
Were the people on Maxalt saying they were pain-free by the end?
There were some people on Maxalt who were pain-free as well, yes.
Well, I'm just wondering whether you measured he measured the extent to which they were in pain. Mm-hmm. So if they went from a 8 to a 1, but weren't pain-free because they still had a 1, that's still going to be a decent finding, but wouldn't count as a pain-free one. But if you found that 40%,
Sure.
50% of the Maxwell people and 2% of the placebo people said they were pain free, that clearly shows that placebos don't make you pain free. But if there was a roughly similar amount of people right across the different wings saying pain free, then that's not really saying much about the finding then.
Well, the pain-free endpoint is arguably the more interesting endpoint in the study for me. The absolute reduction in pain, or the percentage reduction in pain, is interesting, but what more interesting for me is the pain-free endpoint. Listeners might remember the Cochrane review on placebo effects from 2010, which says that there is no placebo effect for objective outcomes or subjective binary outcomes. There is only a measurable placebo effect for continuous subjective outcomes like pain. And my contention is that this is because continuous subjective outcomes are more prone to biased reports. In this case, the primary outcome measure, the difference in pain from baseline to pain at 2.5 hours, is a continuous subjective measure. But pain-free is much closer to a binary measure.
Yeah.
You are pain-free or you're not. It's gone or it's there. There's still some subjectivity in there. There's room for a little bit of grey, a little bit of judgment.
People with experience with certain types of pain are more likely to describe discomfort as pain-free because it doesn't... What one person describes as discomfort, another person describes as pain because of how used you are to feeling that discomfort.
And also the threshold of being a 1 out of 10 pain and a 0 out of 10 pain is a gradation as well.
Yeah.
So you'll be down to, well, it's about 0. Yeah, fine.
I'll
that's
just say
pain-free.
0. Yeah. So there's a little bit of grey in there, but it's. I thought it was interesting that on this outcome measure there was no significant difference between no treatment and open label placebo. Overall, this migraine study doesn't tell us anything new. Modifying information given to patients will modify reported outcomes. Well, we already knew that. The important question is not what magic words we can say to maximize this effect. The important question is whether we are actually modifying an outcome or whether we're just modifying the report of the outcome. Because right now, we don't know what's changing and we don't know why we're changing it. Until a robust, clinically useful placebo effect can be demonstrated, studying which magic words to say is counting the angels dancing on the head of a pin.
So we've already mentioned that Alice and I were up at the Edinburgh Festival for a holiday. Oddly enough, the day before, you were in Edinburgh talking about have we cured cancer and do these quack cures for cancer actually work? We found ourselves in a quack cure for cancer lecture, didn't we?
Yes.
This was a conference taking place in Liverpool promoting Gerson therapy, featuring a chap called Patrick Vickers of the Northern Baja Gerson Clinic. And we saw this advertised. Did we see this on Facebook initially?
I think we saw it through Facebook initially, but it was being heavily promoted by a guy that we've talked about before on the podcast, whose name I've now forgotten.
Sean Walsh. So we've talked about Gerson therapy before on the show and how this is... It's hard because when you spend a lot of time looking into the way that alternative medicine is talking about cancer at the moment, you see certain tropes coming up again and again. And I actually think the alternative cancer cures is one of the most pervasive forms of alternative medicine that you see at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the weird thing is, and I mentioned this plenty of times, we don't really see it. A lot of skeptics don't really see it because a lot of the conversations about how wonderful this thing is that cures cancer, they're taking place in Facebook groups that we're not part of. And these Facebook groups can be absolutely huge. You see like hundreds of thousands of people. And the only time we really ever see it is when it either spills into one of the big pseudoscience players, so someone like a David Avocado Wolf or a Health Ranger or a Gwyneth Paltrow starts saying about this wonderful doctor in Mexico who can definitely cure your cancer as long as you make enough money and fly yourself over there because they don't want you to have the cure. Or we see it when the local newspapers start touting stories about the wonderful, uplifting journey that this particular cancer patient is going on because they are fundraising amongst the community to try and make enough money to have this alternative cure. Always described as a treatment that is not yet available on the NHS.
Yeah.
Very good reason it's not yet available on the NHS. It will never be available on the NHS because it's bullshit. But, of course...
Is that claim ever applied to Gerson?
I've seen it.
The
way I've seen it talked about in the media is for treatments by pioneering treatments by doctors who or pioneering treatments not available in the UK. Not necessarily not available on the NHS, but that's kind of inferred in there. But it's always called something like pioneering treatment or radical treatment or something like that. It's never really explicitly put out there as a alternative, complementary or pseudoscientific is how they should be describing it.
It seems an interesting way of deciding to describe Gerson therapy because it has been around since the early 1900s. It's not pioneering, it's not new, it's not exciting, it's not going to be added to anything anytime soon.
Well, I think that's true, but it's worth bearing in mind that you look at the way these stories get reported, and they're reported through local journalists who aren't... It's not the health specialist at the Liverpool Echo who wrote a story about Sean Walsh, who's a chap who's in a band, and we mentioned him on the show a while back. It's a general reporter, and their story isn't this thing cures cancer. Their story is local person who is stricken and in need is rallied around, the community rallies around them to raise enough money to save their lives effectively. And when we've talked about these stories in the past, the hardest thing is figuring out who do you point out is wrong here, because you can't say the patient's one is wrong because they're just doing everything they can to try and if there's any chance at all, then it's worth taking. Well, it's not. It's false hope. You can't say that people raising money are wrong because they're just trying to help. The real people who are wrong in all of this are the people offering the treatments, and those are the people that you will never get to talk to, the people you'll never see, the people you'll never be in a room with, unless you were in the Holiday Inn in Liverpool on the sort of 15th, 16th of August, as we were. So we saw this advertised and thought this is something worth going along to see exactly how are these cures advertised to people, because this is one of the things that I think we can miss out on. We can see what the pseudoscience of a cancer cure actually is, but we don't necessarily see the way that's communicated to the public, the way it's conveyed to cancer patients, unless you're in those Facebook groups, unless you're in those rooms, unless you're seeing the marketing materials. So that was why it was very useful for us to go along. So we paid £20 each, me, you, and our friend Sarah Clement.
Yes, £20 each. It's £30 on the door.
It was £30 on the door.
If you buy it in advance, it's £20. It was advertised. So there was a big advert that was put on Facebook, and apparently also in the local events organising newspaper.
Yeah, it was. I've been sent. I forget which newspaper it was, but one of the members of just after we finished recording the last episode of the show, in fact, I got a phone call from a member of the MSS saying, "I've just seen my local paper. Did you know about this conference?"
Yeah.
It's like, yes, we're actually already going to it. Funnily enough.
It was titled "Censored for Curing Cancer and Advanced Degenerative Disease."
It was censured, not censored.
In the advert, it's spelt correctly. On his slides, it was spelt incorrectly.
Well, it's not spelled incorrectly because censured is a different word. Censured, CENSURED, is reprimanded. Sort of like being on the wrong side of the law, rather than censored is I'm not allowed to say this thing. Well, I said it and I've been come down on a ton of bricks.
In the advert, it's censored.
Yeah.
And it says, censored by the American Cancer Society and the American Medical Association. In spite of 100 years of proven success, the Gerson treatment continues to be the most powerful and effective alternative therapy available for advanced or non-advanced degenerative diseases, including terminal cancer. And that's in the advertisement that was published in a local events paper, presumably if it got the full image of their PDF.
Mm. So we'll talk about what was actually said during the conference, and we'll talk about what Gerson therapy is. But it's worth pointing out that the room we were in the Holiday Inn, I think I counted around about 80 chairs, something like that, and I only saw 10 to 15 empty seats. So there were 65 to 70 people there.
Yeah, there were a lot of people in that room.
Sure, they were paying 20 quid or maybe 30 quid a head. I don't think the event itself was hugely lucrative. I'm not saying that all the people there, but the fact that you can get that number of people just in Liverpool to come and listen to a talk of someone who is saying, I can cure your cancer. Yeah. And also not just cancer, diabetes and tuberculosis. Yeah, so a bit of everything, really. And
I'd also point out that this is what your Patreon dollars go towards.
This is exactly what your Patreon dollars...
That's why we went,
we have that money, we give it to quacks. That's what when you give us money, you are directly funding quackery. That's the message we want to get across to here. So we went along. So the key to us going along, as we do when we go to these things, was that we weren't there to be disruptive, to shout and argue and to make a fuss, because if we do that, we don't get to hear what's being said. We don't get to learn how this is being marketed to people. So we went along and just listened. Yeah. And we can break down some of the things that were said. But I've got to say, as a top level, I think it's the most shocking room I've ever been in.
Yeah, it was really distressing.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever left a room so convinced that what I've heard will kill some of the people I was sat near. So of the 60 to 70 people in that room, there were no shortage of people who were currently cancer patients.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So that was pretty tough to get through. So, Alice, you've got a breakdown of some of the sort of core claims that were made by Mr. Vickers.
He kind of introduced this conference-style lecture that he was giving by first telling us about how amazing his treatment was, and then telling us all about Max Gerson and how he was this genius, apparently. So says a Nobel Prize winner. Who thinks he was a genius because he cured
Nobel Peace Prize winner.
Nobel Peace Prize winner. Nobel Peace Prize winner.
I didn't know that was the standard for whether you're a genius or not, is you have to be certified by a Nobel Peace Prize winner.
Yeah.
Every single, if you ever see those TV shows about someone being like a genius, every one of those has been rubber stamped by Malala Yousafzai.
So that was quite interesting. So he kind of talked about this particular guy, and then went on to talk about what the Gerson therapy actually was. So we've talked about before, kind of in the broader sense, what it is. So it's this mainly juicing diet where you're taking 13 juices per day from 8 until 8 on the hour every hour. He was very specific about what kinds of things you can put into these juices, and that if you use the wrong things, or you use things that aren't organic produce, you won't do well, which is his favourite way of saying that you're going to die.
Yeah, he did say that an awful lot. There are also plenty of times when he was saying, like, people would say, I'm taking chemotherapy, can I take these juices as well? And he said, no, you need to stop that chemotherapy. You need to stop taking chemotherapy, otherwise the Gerson therapy will not work. So stop your chemotherapy now. You'll be weaned off your medication, and you can be taking Gerson therapy instead. Which is remarkably bad advice to give to a room full of cancer patients.
He started out by introducing the talk with some interesting claims. So he said about his clinic that he runs in Mexico, we're treating advanced terminal diseases, not just cancer, but virtually every single disease we're successfully treating, and we're doing it with the Gerson therapy, an advanced protocol that we've added to the Gerson therapy. Told us lots and lots of people are lying. So he said, there's a reason why you haven't heard about Dr. Gerson. Obviously, and that is because Dr. Gerson single-handedly would have obliterated the pharmaceutical and medical industry as you and I know it today. It's important that you know who's lying to you, how they're lying to you, why they're lying to you, and when they've lied to you. Oh,
yeah, and he was saying that every single newspaper is basically owned by pharmaceutical companies. The major shareholders in every single media outlet are owned by pharmaceutical companies, and the American Medical Association is owned by pharmaceutical companies. The Medicare, everything is owned by pharmaceutical companies. And I wanted to say the BBC and the NHS. Because you're giving this message in exactly the wrong place, but nobody questions that. There's just nodded heads of like, oh yeah, all the media is owned by pharmaceutical companies. Well, the BBC isn't. It's owned by us. You pay your license fee.
He hadn't made this UK specific or even UK. He hadn't even looked at what's happening in the UK because he was talking about how the media, you see adverts all the time from pharmaceutical companies on the TV. It's like, no, you don't. You really don't here. He's like, well, it's true in America, so it must be true here.
Yeah, he never even acknowledged that, but he was just saying, if you see pharmaceutical, you can't watch TV for more than half an hour without seeing loads of adverts for some pharmaceutical products. And at the end, they'll give you this big, long list of side effects. And that's not legal here. No, in the UK, we don't have those those adverts because they are illegal.
Nobody could challenge him on it because he had specifically at the outset of his talk, he'd said that he keep your questions until the end. There'll be a Q&A session. Don't interrupt me. And had also said, I won't take individual questions. I won't do the kind of queue at the end of people wanting to chat to me because I won't have time. I think more so because he wants people to get in contact with him so that he can try and get them onto his consultation.
Yeah, and that's the key. I mean, he runs the Northern Baja Clinic, and one of the things that was absolutely clear all the way through the talk was he was explaining, first of all, how radical and revolutionary and guaranteed this is. And he said the word guaranteed to cure your cancer. He said that plenty of times. So there's that, but also how completely complex this is. So you can't just do it yourself because you'll make fundamental mistakes, like you might put cauliflower in one of your juices, which will ruin everything and basically mean that all the work you've done up until that point is completely wasted. And that was it. So what he wants to do is say, come to my £9,000 a week clinic in Mexico instead to learn how to do it.
Just on that one point, so what he kind of discussed was that you have to do a 2-week clinic, a minimum stay of 2 weeks at the clinic, which they absolutely recommend. He doesn't think that anybody can do it on their own without going to the clinic and spending at least 2 weeks there. He says that most people spend 3 weeks there. Obviously, this is incredibly expensive, but he also says that this is a 2 to 3 year treatment that you have to do perfectly for the full 2 to 3 years. He said that only 10% of patients manage to follow the treatment perfectly for the full 2 to 3 years. And if you make even one small mistake, you won't do well.
Yeah.
If you put the wrong thing in your juices, if you use the wrong types of supplements.
If you go off the diet for a single day, it's as good as never having started.
So do you think this is him justifying to himself why he loses so many patients, or do you think he's cynical about it?
Really hard to tell.
Really impossible
I
to
think
say.
he really believed in what he was saying. Because there were plenty of times during the Q&A that people would say, what about cannabis oil? And he'd be like, nah, doesn't work at all. It's not going to do anything in that area. It's not effective. Whereas I think he wouldn't have had to say that. If he was just trying to make money, then I think he'd go, yeah, and we'd do it as well. So I got the sense that he really believed it. I think there was still a level of cynicism.
Oh, God, yeah.
Which
he knows
is,
how to make money.
Yeah, exactly. And he has to have people come to his clinic. And so it was denigrating chemotherapy, but also denigrating people who try and do this stuff themselves
yeah.
and the complexity of the thing.
So he'd kind of talked the whole way through how complicated it was, but he also he started out denigrating the media and that everybody's lying to you, and then he kind of tried to denigrate medicine as a whole. So he said, I promise you, by the time you leave here today, you will know more about cancer and reversing advanced degenerative disease than any medical doctor on the planet. That's a promise.
Yeah, he did not fulfill that promise.
He did not.
He absolutely didn't.
He said, I'm telling you folks that the science is so crystal clear and it's so perfect that it's indisputable.
He also said that Dr. Gerson had the most consistent rate of curing terminal cancer of all time.
He later said that his success rate in curing patients was 50%.
Yeah.
Which isn't the greatest success rate, because for certain types of cancer, we're up to 98% survival rate. For kinds of testicular cancer, we're up to 98%.
But and that's weird because, as he pointed out, cancer is getting more aggressive. He said one of the things he specifically said was Gerson, in his day, never had to deal with chemotherapy. So the stuff we're trying to deal with now is just crazy. So he's saying that cancer is getting more aggressive because of chemotherapy, and people are dying more often because of chemotherapy and not the cancer. Just enormously dangerous stuff.
Because chemotherapy is made of mustard gas.
Yes, yeah, he did say that. Yeah,
it takes you as close to death as possible, and after the cancer comes back, it's 10 times more aggressive.
He also said the genetic theory of cancer is a fraud. He said the BRCA gene is false. The idea that the BRCA gene, which is responsible for certain types of breast cancer.
So this was actually quite interesting because he was talking about. Sorry, I literally just cut you off there.
No, go for it.
This was quite interesting because he was talking about how you can have a genetic predisposition to cancer, but it's your lifestyle that will actually cause the cancer. And for certain types of genetic aspects of cancer, that's not untrue. Like lifestyle can affect your susceptibility to cancer, but usually it's your lifestyle is causing these mutations, and the mutations are what drive the cancer.
Also, the fact that he said the genetic theory of cancer is a fraud, I think that's not true. I think you're being too charitable to say there might be something in that.
No, but the balance between understanding lifestyle causes and genetic causes of cancer, I think what he was talking about when he talked about genetic theory is a fraud, as well, is that cancer is... Some people believe that cancer is hereditary. Now, that isn't what the science says, but if he thinks that most people believe that isn't necessarily true. Very few types of cancer are hereditary. You don't inherit a gene that drives the cancer. You inherit a gene that might predispose you to a type of cancer, and it's another mutation that really drives that cancer. Hereditary cancer is very, very rare. Mostly you acquire a mutation that drives it throughout your life. It might not just be from lifestyle, but you will acquire this mutation throughout your life. So
I still think he's so far out of order to say that the BRCA gene is not responsible for the cancer, when that's so clear.
Hugely implicated in causing cancer. So he talked a lot about kind of how you should do the treatment, but then he spent an awful long time talking about the specific supplements that he adds. So you have these 13 juices per day, and then you have to do up to, over at least 5 coffee enemas per day. Yeah,
well, I mean, of those juices as well, it has to be organic. He said specifically, if it's not organic, 99% of the time our patients won't make it. So again, just putting it all on the patient. And the problem with this, of course, is that you're doing 13 juices per day. And they talk about something like 20 or 30 pounds of vegetables you're taking every day. It's got to all be organic. The cost of that is going to be incredibly high because organic is obviously much more expensive. And then on top of that, you have to have all the equipment to do that, so juicing, things like that.
Yep.
And the fact that it has such a toll on your lifestyle that you are constantly on the hour every single hour having to have a juice, so you're never that far away from your supply of vegetables, and you're probably never that far away from the toilet either.
He very much said that people who are travelling a lot can't really sustain the Gerson therapy.
Oh Christ, there was that one part in the Q&A where he talked about one of the patients. He said, there's a patient of mine at the moment who's in a band, and he's trying to do this while he's touring, and I think it'll work for a little while, and then I think he'll just go off a cliff and he'll die. It's like, you're talking about a fucking patient. Even if you were legitimately a medical professional, you'd be disbarred for talking about a patient like that in front of an audience of people. But nobody seemed to care about that. And that's it. That's the thing that really got me, is like, that is him talking about the people who are keeping him going, but the people he thinks he's helping. And just the callousness of saying, he'll just go off a cliff. He'll just go off a cliff. It just absolutely astonished me.
So in addition to the 13 juices per day, the 5+ coffee enemas per day, plus ridiculous amounts of castor oil. You're supposed to be taking a ridiculous amount of castor oil, apparently. There's also these supplements that they add. So one thing is they say you should be absolutely taking no sodium because that is really dangerous. But in addition to that, they're saying that you should add potassium to juices. And he talked a lot about the science of why you should be taking potassium, and got it like almost exclusively, managed to get everything wrong about it.
When he talked about adding potassium, he said we put potassium into such a high amount that if a medical doctor learned how much potassium we were giving patients every day, they'd be frantic.
Yeah.
Which is, again, astonishing thing to say.
Because too high levels of potassium will give you a heart attack, give you heart failure. Your heart will stop working. So he talked about the cell structure and how this is entirely dependent on potassium. So he said the integrity of the cell structure is completely dependent on the potassium content within the cell. There's an inverse relationship in our body between sodium and potassium. If you eat sodium, your body dumps potassium, and if you eat potassium, your body dumps sodium. And then he said that if you eat too much sodium, you get an entire collapse of the cellular structure and all systems inside start to break down and you can't function properly.
So is that true, that the sodium and the potassium levels kind of affect each other like that?
Yes. So that bit is true, which I'll talk about in just a sec. But first, I want to just point out how horrific it is to say, you get entire collapse of the cellular structure and you can't function properly. No, you would die. Like if all your cells collapsed, like cells are what build the human body. They are what you are.
Yeah.
If they all collapse,
you'd just be smush.
You wouldn't survive. He says, you can't create energy. You can't assimilate nutrients properly because that takes place inside the cell. You can't detoxify properly because that takes place inside the cell. You cannot build and repair because that takes place inside the cell. Without cells, you don't exist. This is...
Yeah. We are constructed of cells.
If your cells are
like
collapsing...
ISIS or Al-Qaeda.
But you're not going to end up just saying, I've undergone total cellular collapse. I'm feeling a bit peaky.
Yeah.
No,
complete nightmare.
You just die. But he says, if you eat salt in the Gerson therapy, you will not survive, guaranteed. So what he's talking about when he talks about I assume what he's talking about when he talks about this inverse correlation is related to how our cells maintain their structure. And it's mainly hinges on the sodium-potassium pump. So the sodium-potassium pump is a pump that requires energy. It sits on the membrane of cells and it regulates the levels of both sodium and potassium in the cell. It only works in one direction. So when he says... if you eat sodium, your body dumps potassium, and if you eat potassium, your body dumps sodium. That's not true. The sodium-potassium pump only goes in one direction. So you have 3 sodium molecules are pumped out and 2 potassium molecules are pumped in. And that's dependent on each other. So if you have no sodium, you can't get any more potassium in because you need to pump the sodium out to get the potassium in.
In order to get the potassium in. Okay, I see.
Failure of this pump can lead to swelling and lysis of the cell. The cell is destroyed because there is a large influx of water. If you've got a lot of salt inside the cell, you do get a lot of influx of water by osmosis, but actually this swelling of the cell automatically activates the pump. So as soon as you get too much water in the cell, the cell will start pumping out sodium and bringing in potassium. it's also important to export potassium in order to create this gradient that's required to import other nutrients, including glucose and amino acids and things that the cell needs. So the cell's got this perfect way of regulating its water content and its sodium and potassium content, and it all relies on having sodium and potassium present and available for its use. You need both of them, but it regulates everything it needs to on its own, and anything you don't need goes into the blood and out through the kidneys. So it's all beautifully homeostatic. It's all fine. You don't need to take in any more potassium in order to regulate this.
You certainly have to megadose potassium to a point where doctors would be frantic to learn how much you're taking in.
And so this is the thing. Really high levels of potassium can cause tiredness and weakness, feeling of numbness and tingling, nausea and vomiting, trouble breathing, chest pain, palpitations, irregular heartbeats, and in extreme cases, paralysis or heart failure. Your heart stops if you take too much potassium. It's not a good idea to be putting it in every one of your 13 juices that you're taking each day.
Sure.
So that's just one of the supplements that he talks about. He also talks about they supplement patients with coenzyme Q10, which is involved in ATP production. This is true. You do need it supplementing if you're deficient. Most people aren't deficient. He recommends people are taking niacin, which they claim you should use to allow increased blood flow without using energy. It's a vasodilator. It opens up your blood vessels, which it does, but that also drops your blood pressure and can prevent oxygen reaching the brain and lead to dizziness, and you can pass out.
It's also in every box of Frosties.
Yeah.
Yes, it is, yeah.
Most breakfast cereals are fortified, so it'll say, rich in niacin and riboflavin and all that
most
sort of
people
fat.
who can afford to get Gerson therapy probably aren't niacin deficient. Niacin deficiency can be quite a bad thing. If you're mildly niacin deficient, you lose cold tolerance. But if it's severe, you get this disease called pellagra, which is a really nasty disease. And you would need to supplement niacin. Most people aren't deficient. They reckon you should be taking desiccated liver. Didn't really explain why. Pancreatic enzymes. He went on for ages about how we should protect the pancreas and that the pancreas is really, really important for stopping cancer cell division. How we do lots and lots of things to damage our pancreas. Never mind the fact that you ingest pancreatic enzymes, your body breaks them down into amino acids. Same thing we talk about all the time with supplements. You break it down into its constituent components and your body makes what it needs from it. It doesn't matter what you're taking in.
Yeah.
It's just protein. They give B12 injections because they're on a meat-free diet.
Yeah, he did say specifically, if you eat any meat on the Gerson therapy, you will die.
He did.
Straight out. You'll die. Also, if you do any exercise on Gerson, you'll die.
Exercise as well?
Yeah.
Because you need to put all your energy into fighting the cancer.
It reminds me of the of 12-step programs where the reported success rate of 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous includes the definition of successfully having completed a 12-step program includes not having fallen off the wagon.
Yes, yeah.
Which means their success rate is very high because anyone who does not succeed therefore did not complete the program.
Yeah.
It seems like he's
there's enough
all these loopholes,
clauses and caveats to get out. Yeah.
So it's never their fault if you don't do well, if you die from whilst on Gerson therapy, it is the patient's fault.
And that's the heartbreaking thing. That's the absolute heart, because you see patients talking about having spent a long time, an awful lot of money, and invest all their hope on this therapy, and you see them talking about it on their Facebook, on their blogs. If you look for those type of things. It isn't working for me, and the clinician has explained to me what I was doing wrong. It's like I wasn't following it correctly, and we've seen that even with patients that we've spent time looking at, people who were there in that room. I've seen them talking about how, all this stuff that I was putting in, it wasn't working, and here's why. And it's just so heartbreaking to see not only is someone incredibly ill and pouring all of their hope and all of their time into this thing that can't help, but when it doesn't help, they're blaming themselves and feeling terrible about it.
It's the patient's fault, which is heartbreaking. The B12 injections are quite interesting because I think this is another thing that's kind of supposed to get you into spending money. They say, you need to have these injected. You don't need to have B12 vitamins injected. If you do need to take B12 supplements, a high dose oral supplement is totally fine. There's no evidence that injections are any better. but most people don't need them. Yes, people on a meat-free diet sometimes do need B12 supplementation, but actually, interestingly, and he didn't say how much that they're giving to patients, but there was a study released just last week, which I haven't had time to look into in detail yet, so give that big caveat. But there's a new study that might suggest that too much B12 can increase prevalence of lung cancer in men. So...
Yes, I've heard about that study. Yeah, yeah.
It was kind of in the news a little bit last week, and at first glance it seems like it's probably solid research, but I need to look into that in a bit more detail. But either way, you know.
And in men, presumably because it's got some interaction with some androgen.
Probably, yeah.
Which is why it seems to be an effect in men, but not in women.
Yeah. They're also supplementing with stomach enzymes, same thing as the pancreatic enzymes. Your body will break them down into amino acids. It doesn't matter what kind of enzyme you take. Crude liver extract, which he was very upset that they have to give because Gerson was getting 50% survival rate with raw liver juice, but they're not allowed to give that anymore because calves' livers are contaminated with a particular kind of bacteria. So they have to give crude liver extract, and they don't know if it's working. He went on and on and on for ages about flaxseed oil. Well, he started talking about flaxseed oil, and then he went into some really random thing about membrane fats. So he was talking about the cell membrane, which is made up of fats, and said, what kind of fats, whatever fats you're eating. Talked about how saturated fats in the cell membrane are really bad because they've got lots of hydrogen in the saturated fatty acids, and therefore oxygen can't get in because the membrane's got a positive charge. It's acidic. Lots and lots of untrue things here. For one, oxygen has no charge. It can get through membranes. It can get through a lipid membrane very easily. It can diffuse through freely. It doesn't need any kind of charge on the membrane for it to get through.
Sure.
So that's not going to cause you any problems. But also, saturated fats. So the cell membrane is made up of a lipid bilayer, a phospholipid bilayer, where you have a phosphate group at the top. You have two fatty acid tails, and they run in a line of many phospholipids on one side, and then on the alternate side, you've got the two fatty acid tails, and then the phosphate head.
Okay.
So you've got this double layer with the fat in the middle, and which is hydrophobic, and the hydrophilic outer edge. It kind of protects things getting through the cell membrane.
I see.
And so most things can't get through the cell membrane because of this hydrophobic center, whereas oxygen can just diffuse through. But one thing that when I was trying to look at this, when he was talking about how saturated fats are really bad to have in the membrane, actually it's the opposite. Unsaturated fats disrupt the packing of the bilayer, which make it more permeable, which can mean more things can kind of get through. So just a kind of an interesting aside that he's like totally made that up. But either way, it doesn't matter. Like the cell knows what to do with these things. It looks at everything. But he also said juicing is the only way you can get rid of the hydrogen.
Yeah, you couldn't think of any other way of getting rid of hydrogen from the body.
So you have acidic cell membranes.
Right.
Which is bollocks anyway. And the only way you can get rid of the acidic cell membranes is by juicing, which forms potassium hydroxide, which reacts with the hydrogen and gives you water.
All right. So he's suggesting that the presence of hydrogen ions is acidifying your body.
Which it
would do, because that's how acids work.
And he's saying specifically that alkalinity, this is a direct quote of his, alkalinity causes health, acidity causes disease. When you alkalinate the body, sugar actually cures cancer when the body is alkalined. The way that you can cure cancer is massive amounts of alkalinization.
Yeah, but that's not how homeostasis works.
No, it's not. No.
The body does it for you.
Also, you're not going to be able to alkalinize your body past a certain point anyway.
No.
Whenever because typically they'll do a pH test, or a woo practitioner will do a pH test on urine, but they'll just be fucking up the test basically as much as anything else. And that's only going to tell you how alkaline your urine is, how alkaline the stuff you're getting rid of is, which is homeostasis.
He did talk about that, and he did say how people who do urine tests it is a waste of time.
Yeah.
He was talking about doing blood tests for that, but I mean, you still can't alkalinize your body. And nor would you want to. He talks about potassium hydroxide from the juicing, but that is corrosive. Like being very, very alkali is just as bad as being very, very acidic.
Yeah.
But your body manages what it needs fine anyway.
When I was at school, we were told a story about someone who accidentally trod in a bucket of sodium hydroxide. Which is exceptionally alkaline. It's like pH 13, 14, so it's like way off the top end of the scale. So they stood in this bucket of sodium hydroxide and then pulled their thing out and went, oh, shit, and pulled their boot off and then pulled off their sock and their foot came with it. So they just all the skin of the foot kind of peeled off with the sock, having taken it off. It's what my chemistry teacher told me at school.
It might not have been true, but...
It does sound a bit like a
apocryphal story.
A tale.
Yeah.
But an indicative one.
That chemistry teacher used to foam at the mouth, so it's fine.
Blimey. The thing that I took away from this, obviously, you go through the crazy science that he was saying. I don't think the majority of people there would have heard him mis-explaining this science and thought, okay, I now know how all this works. I don't think people were following him. I think he's just throwing science at them so that when they go away and think about what he said, they go, well, he had all that science to back him up without understanding it. But the stuff that
with science.
Yeah, and the stuff that he said that was really dangerous to me is the stuff he was saying about chemotherapy. He is specifically saying things like, and these are direct quotes, if patients come to us having had chemotherapy, it takes 3 to 6 months to detoxify them from chemotherapy. If they've had chemo, we have to be careful. When you've had chemo, it stores in your cells. So if you do juices, it pulls the toxic material out of your cells and releases it into your bloodstream. And it can send a really toxic chemo patient into chemotoxic shock and can kill them. So the juicing itself, he says, is ejecting the chemo from your cells, and that's what's causing you to die of chemotoxic shock. He says it takes 2 years of Gerson therapy to cure cancer fully. If you've had chemo, forget about it. It's going to take even longer than that.
One thing that I found particularly distressing as well when he was talking about that was he'd said it can take 3 to 6 months to get the chemo out of your system before you can go on the full treatment. Once you're on the full treatment, they recommend no scans in the first 6 months.
No scans in the first 6 months, exactly, yeah. So if it is progressing, don't ever find out about it. Yeah, which is dangerous.
And if you've been
as
on
hell.
chemo first and they're trying to wean you off the chemo and build up the treatment, you're going 3 to 6 months on the reduced treatment and then 6 months before you can have any scans. That could be up to a year before you have any scans and see the damage that being off conventional medicine has actually done to your cancer.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who are going for these cancer quack things are ones who've, like with Sean Waltz, tried conventional treatment and the cancers come back and they get frustrated and want to try something else.
And we found that from people in the audience. During the Q&A, there were people who actually said, I had cancer a while back. I had it was the surgery, but not the chemotherapy. I had the surgery.
A breast cancer patient who'd had the surgery.
And that was all fine. I didn't want to have the chemotherapy at the time. And now I've got cancer again. So that just shows that conventional stuff doesn't work. So I'm going to try this stuff now. It's like, no, it shows you didn't follow through on your conventional stuff. You should have had the adjuvant therapy.
That particular patient had said that it had metastasized to her bones and that she was taking Herceptin, and he recommended that she get off it.
Yeah, he said stop taking that now. Yeah, you need to stop taking that. So the direct advice he was giving the patients in the room that was scary. But just before we get to that, one of the things that I've got a slide in front of me that he put up, I managed to take a photo of. He says, typical response to Gerson therapy. 1, tumours destroyed within 8 to 12 weeks. He said that's what Max Gerson was getting. It takes us a little longer now, but that's because loads of people are having chemotherapy these days, and that's ruining things. And also people have things like cheese and dairy, and that's making us all far sicker. So that's why we can't do it in 8 to 12 weeks. But
so now it's at least 6 months.
Now it's at least 6 months. High blood pressure normalised within 2 to 3 weeks. Diabetes reversed within 8 to 12 weeks. Didn't roll back on that one, so that's all out there. And he said skin conditions cured as well. And he said all skin conditions are precursors to cancer. All of them are indicative of cancer. He also said if you've got localized cancer somewhere, it isn't really localized. Guaranteed, if it's in one place, it's all throughout your entire system, which is crazy bullshit. So you could have a lump. You could have a lump in your breast that surgery could remove. If it's caught early enough, you'll be fine. But telling people, well, actually, you won't be fine. It's systematic, so don't have that surgery. Go and have this this extensive Gerson therapy instead, and let that grow and let it become metastatic until it is systematic.
Yeah,
and that's a self-fulfilling prophecy that ends in someone dying. Absolutely crazily dangerous. Some of the things he was saying is that he's also worth pointing out Patrick's background, because he's talking about curing cancer and curing diabetes. You might wonder what his medical background is. He's a chiropractor by training.
But he did say that they're taught exactly the same as medical doctors, and they're taught like outdated stuff.
Yeah.
So obviously, like,
So
he
obviously
knows.
exactly the same. So he does recommend that if you are doing this, you should also go and see a chiropractor. You need to get adjusted, and also go and see an acupuncturist, because that's going to help your immune system. The fact that time and time again he's telling people in the audience, don't take your your treatment, don't take your medicine, that scared the hell out of me to listen to.
Oh, gotcha.
There's a lady there who sat in front of us, and she's talking about how she's had bowel cancer and has had part of her bowel removed and can't have the enemas. And that's her concern, is that how do I do this stuff if I can't do the enemas? And he said, well, in a bit you'll be fine. Once it's healed a bit, you can do the enemas. But typically, he said, if you've got a bag, you don't do well anyway. Just so dismissive. There was a lady here who was in the audience who had a partner who died of pancreatic cancer. She did the Gerson therapy with him all the way up until the point where he died. Her partner died. Now she has cancer herself, and she's doing the Gerson therapy. And the fact is that she was dismayed that her local Gerson naturopath has retired, so she can't go to that person anymore. So now she's got to do it herself. But it just shows again the level of commitment that people can have, because they're desperate. They have commitment to an idea that she's seen not work. She's seen the ramifications of this. That worries the hell out of me. There was another thing that
when you train patients to blame themselves when it doesn't work,
Yeah.
oh, it's because you exercised, or you missed a juice, or you missed a day, or you had some salt, or whatever. Well, it's not. Okay, it didn't work for so and so, but you must have fucked it up. I'm not going to fuck it up. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do
I'll
it right.
fine.
Yeah, I think that's it. He was also saying about the bit that really annoyed me was he was talking about prostate cancer. He said, "Do you know what the treatment is for an 85-year-old man who who has prostate cancer? No treatment.
Yeah, probably nothing. Yeah."
He said, but and that's because of. He says, but if you're 25, that's a death sentence to you. He says, and why is that? He said it's because the older generation, when they were eating, they didn't have all the chemicals in our food that we have now. So they have a better constitution to be able to deal with that.
No.
It's like, no, it's because prostate cancer will take 20 years to kill you. And if you're 85, you don't have 20 years.
Yeah,
if you're 25,
you
you do.
The cancer.
Yeah. It was so astonishing to see that. Then you had the people there who were talking about using this for other things. So there was a guy who sat behind me who talked about how his son was autistic, but he's cured his son's autism with the Gerson therapy. And the bit that really distressed me was where he was talking about the enemas. And he said of himself, he said, when I do the enemas to myself, I know it says you're supposed to keep them in for 15 minutes, but I can't stomach it for more than 5. I find it far too hard. What am I meant to do about that? How do I get better? Because the thing is, my son can go as long as you like. He can go as long as you like. It doesn't bother him. It's like, no, it's just your son is still autistic and he can't express the fact that you're basically doing something that you couldn't stomach yourself, you can't handle, but you're his dad, and he's willing to put up with it because you're doing it. So this was just all the way through. There was just patient after patient after patient in that audience that he's just telling, don't take your real treatment. And there was a couple at the back of the room, and oh God, of all the people in that room that I wanted to talk to them the most, because they said they had a child, I forget whether it was a boy or girl, who they'd been offered a trial of a new immunotherapy drug on the NHS or adjunct to the NHS, that they've been offered this trial. What should we do? And he said, yeah, they'll do trials. They'll do trials and trials and trials. They'll never, ever come to anything. It's just not going to work. It's not going to be worth it. You're telling them not to, because clearly if they're in a position where they've been offered a clinical trial, it's already in a position where conventional stuff, where the best treatments that we have already presumably aren't, you're not going to get in that position if things are working.
Sure.
This is something that actual medical doctors think might have a hope of working, and you're saying don't do that, don't trust the doctors, come and spend huge amounts of money doing this thing for at my clinic. I mean, I honestly think it's the most disturbing room I've ever been in, and of those 65 to 70 people, would you estimate at least 20, I would say, were probably cancer patients currently, from what we could tell, from
probably.
what they said or the way they were talking amongst themselves.
And that's just based on the people who asked questions. We saw Sean Walsh in the room. We knew that he obviously has
he didn't look well.
The other thing that I thought was really interesting, so in addition to training patients to blame themselves if it's not working, they're also training patients not to see worsening symptoms. So he talked at length about how normally when you're trying to lose weight, a doctor will tell you to restrict your calories to 1,500 calories per day. We've got patients on 3,500 to 4,000 calories per day, and they're still losing weight, losing loads and loads and loads of weight. You're like, no, they're losing loads and loads of weight because they're incredibly sick and they're juicing and going to the bathroom constantly. But these are symptoms that patients need to be aware of. If you're having dramatic weight loss, you're
especially
not
when
well.
you're on a high-calorie diet and dramatic weight loss, there's something seriously wrong going on there,
But don't see that as a potential symptom. See that as the therapy is working.
Yeah.
So, in summary, I would say this is the most disturbing room I've ever seen. I've been in the most disturbing talk I've ever seen of all the things that I've spent time researching and seeing in person. And this is something that we as skeptics have to be really hot on, because this isn't a one-off. It's a one-off in Liverpool in the sense that there aren't these talks every week, but these talks are happening all around the world, around the country, and also they were able to fill a room, which means there is an appetite out there.
In fact, the guy's website, the guy who was speaking on his website, he says, "I will go anywhere you want to talk to people as long as you guarantee me a crowd of 100 or more."
Yeah.
I will come.
I think it was like 50 at least 50. I think. I don't think it was 100, but it was 50. But
I mean, they could have guaranteed him a crowd of 100 or more, and then it turned out they were wrong. But that's what he said at his website. If you've got a crowd of 100 people, I'll come and speak for you. So basically, every talk that guy's doing, he's not think he's doing it to a dozen people.
No,
he thinks he's doing it to 100 people.
Yeah, and I'd be really surprised if he weren't, because this is. It's really prevalent, it's hugely popular, and it's probably, I'd say, the biggest pseudoscience that we as skeptics are facing today, and we all have to be very aware of what we can do about it.
So QED, things are hotting up for QED, which is in a scant few weeks now. I think
it's like a month and a bit. It's like 5 weeks or something.
5 weeks, I think it is. To
like
QED.
3 episodes, I think. 2 or 3 episodes from now will be our live QED one.
Good God, I'm starting to get scared.
Yeah, you and me both, mate.
So, we are hotting up things on QED. So we've recently we have put out several announcements about stuff that we're going to do. So the first thing that we've got to talk about is Katie Steckles.
Yes.
So Katie Steckles came and did a talk for us at Merseyside Skeptics recently.
And we missed it. We both missed it.
I mean, I saw it. I thought it was fucking
all right.
brilliant.
Good.
Yeah. It was good.
I saw Marsha's talk instead. It was
all right.
It was Marsha's talk.
It was all right.
Decent, solid.
It was a good talk. I see you talk all the time.
That's true.
So she came and did a talk for us at Merseyside Skeptics. We knew when we do that we'd already booked her for QED, but she was spectacular at Merseyside Skeptics.
Excellent. So she can be doing her mathematical life hacks workshop, so you can find out how to tie your laces better and put duvets on sheets on duvets better.
I saw lots of photos from, because I got people to send me, because we've got an Instagram account now.
We do have an Instagram account. Yeah.
So I got people to send me photos of Katie Steckles' talk, and the photos looked amazing. She was doing lots of very hands-on, like...
There was lots of hands-on stuff.
It looked really good.
And that's what's going to be happening at
so
QED.
That's going to be at QED. So that's the first of the workshops I think we've announced for QED.
It is. We've got others coming.
Katie Steckles on her mathematical life hacks workshop. So that's going to be brilliant.
We will also be having a Skeptics in the Pub workshop as well. So you'll find details of that soon. But if you are a Skeptics in the Pub organizer and you're coming to QED, that's the opportunity for people to who organize groups to meet each other and to chat about shared kind of problems and shared solutions and things like that. And I think we'll also be sticking something up on our website soon, which is kind of soliciting a few views from Skeptics in the Pub organisers ahead of the event. So if you hear this, have a quick check on our site, because it may be announced by then.
Sure. I'd just point out at this juncture that QED's workshops are free. There's not an additional fee to attend a workshop. You can come along as long as you've got a QED ticket. You're welcome in the workshop. The only limiting factor is how many people want to go and how many people we can fit in the room.
Absolutely.
So there's not an additional fee to come along to a workshop. So that's one thing that we've got to announce. The other thing we've got to announce is, I know, Marsh, you're particularly happy with the title of this panel, which Andy came up with.
I think it's a good title.
Which is it's hungry like the wolf.
Wolf.
Hungry like the wolf, but wolf with an E.
Well, with an E, like David Avocado, wolf.
It's very much a written gag.
It's a written gag, so it's a good job we're doing that on an audio medium.
So that's going to be a panel about food woo, food bullshit, pseudoscience in diet and dietary advice and things like that. That's going to feature Covens and Apathy from Forbes. Yep. It's going to feature Andy Wilson, known person who likes to eat.
He does like to eat. That's true.
He's a bit of a foodie, is Andy. We also have on that panel Charlotte Hardman from the University of Liverpool. who is a psychologist with a particular interest in how people are relating to their diet. And we also have Anthony Warner, known as the Angry Chef.
The Angry Chef.
And they're going to be convening on a panel to discuss food woo and food bullshit at QED. We've got more panels to come, more workshops to come, more podcasts to come.
Yep.
We're going to be doing a live show.
Incredulous is doing a live show.
Incredulous is doing a live show.
The Parapod's doing a live show.
We've got the guys from the Parapod coming down. So, yeah, an awful lot to be excited about at QED. Tickets are £109, £75 if you're a student or if you're under 18. You can get more information about QED and buy your tickets at QEDcon.org.
That's October 13th to 14th and 15th.
October 14th and 15th. On the 13th, we have a Skepticamp event. Skepticamp is an unconference. A Skepticamp is an event where the audience provides the content. So if you want to take part in Skepticamp, you want to come along, you want to present some content, you are welcome to present some content. If you want to just watch some content, you're welcome to do that. That is a completely free event. You don't even need a QED ticket to go to Skepticamp. You can just go along and attend and watch and take part. More information about that is available on the homepage of QEDcon.org or at skepticamp.co.uk. So that's the big QED plug. Very excited for QED now, and hope that all of our listeners, everyone in the UK listening to this, should be coming to QED.
You should. It's always good fun. It's definitely worth coming.
It's going to be marvellous. And Marsh, I believe we just put a new episode of Be Reasonable out.
We did. I interviewed Kerry Cassidy, who describes herself as a documentary filmmaker and investigative journalist. She runs a website called Project Camelot, on which you can find all manner of interesting conspiracy theories about the deep state and the suppression of UFO evidence and the evidence that that lizards are in control of the world, and much, much more besides that.
Okay.
And we had a very long and wide-ranging conversation, it's fair to say. That was maybe a little more tense at times than some Be Reasonables can be, but I think if you like Be Reasonable, I think this is very much a Be Reasonable episode, so feel free to go and tune in to that. You can find that at merseysideskeptics.org.uk/podcasts or Be Reasonable on iTunes and places where podcasts live.
Aside from that, then, that is all we have time for.
I think so.
All that remains is for me to thank Marsh for coming along today.
Thank you.
And thank you to Alice.
Thank you.
Get well soon, Alice.
Thank you.
Feel better. We have been Skeptics with a K, and we will see you next time.
Bye now.
Bye.
Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society. For more information, visit our website www.merseysideskeptics.org.uk or email podcast@merseysideskeptics.org.uk.